album ever.
Thank you. That was not. Keep it up. Keep it up. I'm going to do a running commentary now. I'm actually going to do a story, a Pesach story. I have a Facebook Live running commentary on my page about, this is number 84. So thank you for that shout out. That was not orchestrated. God bless you. So today, I just got a shout out from a friend who's running. Well, I'm not the only one in Central Park. I thought I'd be the only one here today, but it looks like New York has not been taking this too seriously. But I'm just going to try to stay away from people as much as possible. So, almost forgotten part of our history is the concept is the stories of the blood libels, and they've happened too many times and with grave consequences. And I'm going to share one of them. In my childhood, I grew up, bless him, with hearing the stories of blood libels. And of course, they're almost horror stories and gory. We didn't watch videos, movies in those days, or these days either. But they're not the most comfortable stories to tell, maybe today, because people are trying to be PC. They're just not telling the stories. But the most recent one I know of, the actual blood libel story, was in the early 1900s. Mendel Bayless, you can look it up on Wikipedia. And we have friends, or Russian friends, today told me just a few years ago that, and these are people who are younger than me, that when they grew up as children in Russia, they still had their non-Jewish friends claim that they need to use the blood of a Christian in order to make matzah. They still believed it. In these days, just a few years ago in Russia. So it's real and it's scary. But thank God they're not happening today. But now I'll share one story, which is part of the story is just to revive the history of the blood libels, which is not really my main point. My main point is, in sharing a story, is the concept of what we call emunas tzaddikim. You hear a story from a tzaddik, it brings faith. This is a story of the Baal Shem Tov style. It was a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. His name was Reb Leib Saras. They used to call him Reb Leib Saras. His name was Aryeh Leib ben Sarah, and he was a known miracle worker, a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. So, in his later years, he had an accompanying rabbi. His name was Azriel, who was a disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he asked him one day, he says, "Come, let's go on a trip," and we're off. They reach this little town near Vilna, and they stay at an inn. The Jewish innkeeper is there. Reb Leib Saras calls out to the Jewish innkeeper. He says, "Please go to the Duke of the town and tell him that Leib ben Sarah is here to speak with him." The Jewish innkeeper, shocked to the core. In those days, the dukes were the most dangerous, often were the most dangerous people to communicate with. And he said the Duke would never speak to a Jew, and no Jew would ever come out alive of the Duke's presence had he attempted to go there. So Reb Leib says, "Do as I say, or your end will be bitter," threatened him. And immediately, as the story goes, his children, two of his sons, started coughing. I think it was corona, something like corona, but it wasn't as severe because they started coughing. They showed signs of illness, and he said, "Okay, I'm off. I'm out of here." And he runs off to the palace, the Duke's palace. So, of course, the guards over there saying, "Jew, what are you doing here? Who lets a Jew into these gates?" He says, "I have an urgent message for the Duke." And they let him in, and the Duke says, "What is it?" He says, "I'm an innkeeper down the road. I have an elderly Libel Ben Sarah. He says he needs to see you immediately." The Duke says, "I'm on my way. Hold on one second." Quickly gets dressed, and he rushes off in his royal carriage to the inn with the innkeeper. He goes inside, and they're secluded for a few minutes, and then he comes back out, and he goes back home. As soon as he leaves, Reb Sarah's and his attendant Azriel, they also leave. They get it back in the carriage, and they go. Hey, this is my first running story instead of a running commentary. Hope it works out for you guys. So, right after, as soon as the Duke gets home, he just realizes, what just happened here? I just went with a strange Jew to a Jewish innkeeper's home. What's going on? Who is this old man? And he dispatches his soldiers to go grab that old man and bring him back here to the Duke's palace. Well, as noted already, they had already left, so they come to the innkeeper, to the inn, and he's gone. Okay, moving on. A few months later, this Pesach. Just before Pesach, the innkeeper's Gentile servant disappears. Nowhere to be found. And the rumor goes out hard and strong that the innkeeper, in his quest to bake matzah according to the Jewish tradition, and this story is in the 1700s, the mid 1700s, where the blood libels were often, unfortunately, common. So this Gentile servant has disappeared, and the priest sends out a note saying it was definitely a Jew who murdered his servant in order to get the blood, because they believe, or they spread the lies, that the Jewish people need blood of a Christian in order for the matzah to be kosher for Passover. So they grabbed the Jew, they put him into prison, and they started torturing him to extract a confession. And after days and who knows, hours and days of torture, unfortunately, the Jew was being tortured so much, so he says, you know, my death is better than my life at this moment, at this time. And he went ahead and officially confessed, repeated the words that they said, yes, I killed this child for the matzah. So they take him to the court, and they said, hey, we have a confession here, let's go ahead and put him to death. And in order to do that, they needed the Duke's signature, that same Duke. So they go to the Duke, ask him for the signature, and the Duke responds, says, you know what, sure, no problem, but I need to do one thing first. My horses are not the best anymore, they're old and frail, my wagon horses. I need to go to the market, to the horse market, and get me some good horses, fresh horses. And this Jew happens to be the area's expert on horses. So I'm going to take him to the market fair, to the horse fair, a couple towns down. And after that, we'll bring him back and you'll do whatever you want with him. So they get on, he takes the Jew with him to the fair. And at the fair, as they're walking around the horse stables, suddenly this servant who disappeared, this disappearing servant, suddenly appears right in front of his master. And the Duke wasn't around at the time. And his master says, "What? Where are you? Where have you been? What happened?" And he said, basically, he said, for weeks, they tried to convince me to run away and to just disappear. And I didn't want to because you took care of me so well and I love you and your family. But just a few days ago, whenever this happened, they just took me, they tied me up, the priest and his people tied me up, they put me into a wagon, and they just kept let the wagon go for days and days. And I don't even know where I was, because I was completely bound and tied and blindfolded. And he says, and now, just like a day or so ago, some elderly Jew with his assistant, the Libel Saras, picked me up in a wagon, drove me all the way over here to this market, and told me that I'm going to find you here. And here you are. This is how they met again. So the Jew innkeeper had to play the smart, and he said, okay, go into this hotel and just wait for me there. And when the Duke comes out and gets his horses officially that he was looking for, now they needed another wagon driver, because they had a one-way wagon on the way to the horse fair where they had more horses that they need to bring back. And our innkeeper says, you know what, I have a friend who lives in this area who's really good. He's a good wagon driver, and we could use him, and he lives back near Vilna, so he'd be happy to join us. And he brings his servant along for the ride. As they're riding back, everything's quiet. The Duke turns to the Jewish innkeeper, says, I have a question. He says, I need to confide something into you and ask you a question. So he says, remember a few months ago you called me to meet this elderly Jew, this sage? I said, yes, absolutely. He says, well, this is what happened. He says, I don't know what overcame me, but I arrived, and he told me, he says that there will come a time in the future. He says, when there comes a time in the future when you're asked to put this Jew, the innkeeper, to death, bring him to the horse fair a few towns down. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And he says, from there the salvation will come. He says, I did that, says the Duke, but I don't see the salvation in sight. We're nearing our town near Vilna, and soon I'm going to have to hand you over and sign the decree to have you killed because of the blood libel. What should I do? So this was the time for our innkeeper friend to point to the wagon driver and say, look, that's our servant. Let him tell you the story. And once again, God saved the day for the Jewish people. But that's a story that I grew up with. Many such stories. You could read about them even on Wikipedia or anywhere else in the Jewish literature. Bottleneck over here, Central Park. But I hope, but really the main point of the story is the story that our tzaddikim, our righteous people, are looking out for us through God's Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, is taking care of us, and we should never despair, even when things look very dim and grim. So hopefully we'll all be released from all of our challenges, all of our struggles, all of our libels, external and internal, and we celebrate Pesach in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, in Heira V'Yameinu, Mamash. Take care. Chag Sameach.